right.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Case-Cohen. I manage the Pend Oreille Conservation District. We're based out of Newport, but we cover the entire county of Pend Oreille. We're part of a wider network of 45 conservation districts located throughout Washington State, and we protect and enhance critical areas and are essentially the liaison for landowners to help in that effort. So today I will give an overview of some of the programs that we offer, also the connection between water quality and weeds, and what we see on the landscape here in Pend Oreille County that might contribute to weeds and what you can do to prevent them and how we might be able to help you. So, 1 second. There we go. Again, really covering the causes and contributions. If you live along the Pend Oreille River, this is a pretty familiar sight for you, I imagine. So again, covering the connection between water quality and aquatic weeds. We'll go through your Asian water milfoil, and again, just a very basic discussion of how water quality impacts those and increases the likelihood and the presence of these weeds. Just Eurasian water milfoil, purple loosestrife, and then flowering rush. We'll cover livestock and waterways and some potential solutions that we might be able to help you with. Soil erosion along the Pend Oreille River, and again, those potential solutions, and maybe covering some unique methods for aquatic weed management. Okay, so in 1972, the Environmental Protection Agency enacted the Clean Water Act. At that time, industry really had little, if any, regulation on what could be discharged into our waterways. At this point, rivers were catching on fire. Our water quality was significantly impacted, our drinking water, our groundwater. So the EPA came in and established different protocol and different ranking criteria used to determine what a given water body's water quality would be rated. So, some brief overview of what water quality is, or what waters are monitored for, specifically surface waters. So we have dissolved oxygen. Dissolved oxygen is what aquatic life needs to breathe. It's created from large structures in the water, rocks creating ripples, movement in the water, and again provides a way for aquatic life to breathe. We have temperature, turbidity, which deals with sediment, nutrients that come from plants and waste, toxic metals or chemicals, which the metals can come from natural sources as well, natural bedrock, or chemicals, again, that come from industrial areas, bacteria, that can come from waste and other natural sources, pH, which changes, increases in acidity or alkalinity based on on natural and synthetic sources as well. So in the Pend Oreille River watershed, it's considered a Category 5 303D listing. So that is either, it's an impaired body of water for dissolved oxygen and temperature. And if you've been on the Pend Oreille River, I mean, it's a lake, essentially. So we don't really see the channelization that you would see in a natural system, or what the system looked like before the dams were installed. It's also it's a warm body of water. I remember last year going on site visits with landowners like yourselves and seeing plenty of dead fish along the banks. And last year, of course, was a very warm year. I think someone said the water was like 79 degrees Fahrenheit or something. I mean, it was just extremely warm. And so for the native fish that we have in the area, they prefer much cooler water. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today will be to decrease those temperatures, to create some natural structures in the water that can increase that dissolved oxygen, and again, implementing practices that minimize weeds, which then also can contribute to decreased dissolved oxygen too, but I'll get into that later. So non-point source pollution. So non-point source, we talked more about point source pollution, which is where we have a known source, like an industry, right? some large factory that's discharging pollutants into a body of water. Non-point source pollution is a collection of multiple different sources. So on the Pend Oreille River, we might have, you know, various livestock operations where livestock are wading in the water, they're loafing, they're drinking the water, they're, you know, also doing their business in the water. We have increased development along the Pend Oreille River, which is a significant contributor. We'll get into this more, of course, but the more natural areas of the river were densely vegetated and densely treed, and when landowners move into this area, they really want that riverfront view, right? Well, in that process, you're removing all of that vegetation that's holding the bank in place and is increasing that erosion. So a lot of the calls and work that I do, the people that I work with, they reach out to us after the development has already taken place. So just one suggestion I could have to you, and I think, you know, my tune will continue to change on this as I learn more. My background is in soil health, and I work with farmers largely, but I'm learning more and more about this river and the people that live along it, that you contact the district or natural resource managers before you even start developing, so we can help you develop in a way that minimizes negative impacts to the river and to your local environment. Again, livestock, and I'm not someone who's totally against having livestock have intermittent access to water. You know, if you look at wildlife would come up to water, drink from it, but then leave. The issue is when we have, say, a confined operation where those livestock have continuous access to water. That's, like I said, they loaf, they hang out in the water, they don't know that it's not okay for them to relieve themselves in the water, right? So we have these increases in phosphorus and nitrogen. So those increased nutrient loads are really attractive to plants and aquatic life, which then increases the likelihood of having weeds. Like I said, weeds love, I mean, those are 2 of 3 major, and you'll even find increased potassium too from waste, but it's mostly nitrogen and phosphorus that really we need to be concerned about when dealing with weeds and water quality. Yeah, as I said, so that soil erosion, when we have disturbed areas, when there's compacted soils, either for agriculture or just regular land use, and we have heavy rainfall, you'll have runoff of the fertilizers that you apply, the herbicides, you know, just any form of nutrients that have been applied to your land that wasn't able to infiltrate into the soil and be soaked up. It then runs into our waterways, which then increases the available nutrients for those plants. They continue to grow in increased numbers, they then die off, and we then are in a hypoxic water environment. So as they die off, the microbes that consume the decaying organic material with what has died from those plants, they respire and they release carbon dioxide. So that, you know, the availability of oxygen is therefore significantly decreased because of that. So you see it in the dead zones in the Gulf of, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Mississippi River. I mean, it's just runoff of nutrients that is contributing to this. So in our county, we have the ability, you know, to work with the weed, to work with Conservation District, PUD, the tribe, to prevent that and to learn more. So again, weeds really prefer disturbed areas. So when you are developing your lots and it's cleared completely, I mean, you're just gonna have a whole flush of weeds, whatever was in that weed seed bank. You're creating a vacuum, essentially, where plants that are undesirable or non-native just have an opportunity to take over. So really remember that as you're developing your property. Let's see. Right, and it can be further exacerbated by the noxious weed infestations. Like I said, I mean, it's just a it's a vicious cycle, right? They're present, they are introduced, they reproduce, die off, or consumed by microbes, and continue to grow and take over an area like folks have already discussed today. So we really want to work with the weed board, work with your natural resource managers to learn how you can minimize and mitigate for the impacts from noxious weeds. So we'll first talk about Eurasian water milfoil. So as we all likely know, it forms dense mats largely through vegetative reproduction. It breaks off and it can just repopulate in another area downstream. I mean, it's pervasive, it just takes over. It grows best on fine textured inorganic sediments. Growth increases in areas with high sedimentation rates and nutrients, like I talked about. You know, if you've cleared an area, you no longer have a vegetation holding your bank in place, you're losing sediment when the flows are high in the river, like this June, right? That sediment deposits somewhere, you've likely lost some of your fertilizer from your weed and feed that you applied to your lawn, and it's a growth medium for those weeds to establish. So keep that in mind. Again, and these dense populations can create eutrophication, like I said. They can create an environment where the fish that we enjoy fishing, where other aquatic organisms have called home way before we were here, can no longer live. So realize that you do have an impact on your environment with what you do. So again, not much purple loosestrife here, but it's one of the weeds I decided to cover. It can produce over 1 million seeds per year. It's transported by water, wind, feathers, and fur, so it just likes to hitch a ride and move on. It can survive in a wide variety of environments: standing water, wet meadows, wetlands. It significantly chokes out waterways. It slows those natural flows and promotes the silt deposition. So if you have a cleared area, purple loosestrife moves in or something like it, even reed canary grass too, right? It continues to create a medium for it to continue to grow. More silt deposition, more of that sediment deposition, the more purple loosestrife you have. I mean, it's really good at surviving, right? It's what it's supposed to do. Yeah, it increases turbidity, you know, by increasing that silt deposition. Turbidity deals with how clear the water is, because if you have a lot of sediment, the water's not very clear, right? We have this picturesque idea of what a beautiful waterway is. It's nice and clear, clean, and cool, and this creates the opposite of that, or it can help do so. Crowds out native vegetation. You know, we talk about temperature. When you don't have that native vegetation, those big cottonwoods, big ponderosa pines, aspen along your waterways that provide shade, provide habitat for your fish, you just have a bathtub, which, you know, our rivers aren't supposed to be bathtubs, in my opinion. I have a different tone than I've had in the past, I'm sorry. Yeah, so flowering brush. Spreads by rhizomes. It displaces native vegetation. Sharon already covered a lot of this. Dead stands can block waterways, just like that purple loosestrife. It prevents waterways from their full ecological function, which does impact that water quality, and again, creates habitat for warm water-loving fish, which our native fish, they really like cold water. Less than 65 degrees Fahrenheit, if I'm not right, if I'm not wrong. But so we're talking about what we need to do to get livestock out of the water. Installing exclusion fencing and watering facilities is really the best way to do it. And there are studies that show that livestock really do prefer water in a watering facility and just a trough. It's easy to access. You know, you can train them pretty easily to use those, to push their nose into the balls and move them around. This is an example of a frost-free watering trough. We installed this last year through the Voluntary Stewardship Program. We actually have more funding for this particular project. So if you have livestock, or you know someone who has livestock along a body of water that has had fish in the past, or is considered a fish-bearing stream, then please come talk to me, take one of my cards, talk to Mary too, we share Mary, and let me know, because we'd love to get more fence built, more watering facilities available. And one thing I like to clarify too with these, with the exclusion fencing, you have a fence, or there's a gate. So say there was a malfunction in your watering facility for some reason. Your cows, you know, they can have access in a serious event. I am even okay with what's called flash grazing, where you allow your livestock in the waterway to help manage weeds, because livestock are crucial for that piece. They can come in and mow down a pretty weedy area, and then you take them out using prescribed grazing practices, which again, I've been trained in and would love to help someone work on. But yeah, so there are options. Just please let us know if you're interested. Oh, I'm still sharing screen. Okay, sorry. The video is supposed to be off, right, Mary? Hey, Mary. The video on this is supposed to be off? No? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Oh, my video is supposed to be on here?
Either way.
Okay. Okay, I'll turn it on. Sorry. Great. Okay, so I'll talk about the voluntary stewardship program. Thanks for a lot of what we do. It's the goal of the voluntary stewardship program is to protect and enhance critical areas while maintaining agricultural viability. So this was an alternative that the county, that Pend Oreille County opted into instead of the critical areas ordinance, which says you have to have a mandatory setback, a mandatory buffer of X feet. But what this argues is that we trust our landowners. We believe that they want to protect these critical areas, which include wetlands, fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, steep slopes, floodplains or frequently flooded areas, and critical aquifer recharge areas. It says that you all are willing to work with an agency like the Conservation District to implement practices that can protect or enhance these critical areas, which I do believe is true. We all want to leave our land better for ourselves, for our children, and our children's children. So that's what this program allows us to do. So if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to myself or Mary. Okay, so this is the process for a VSP cost share project. So you first reach out to Pend Oreille, the Conservation District. We'll conduct an initial site visit. We'll first report any of your current best management practices that you've implemented. We'll go through an individual stewardship plan or ISP, complete a checklist that kind of tells me what you've done, what you're interested in doing, what you never want to do, which, you know, some people just don't want to plant a cover crop, which is okay. You know, I want to plant a cover crop, but it's okay if you don't want to. So then we would apply for and receive necessary permits. We would also go through a cultural resources process as well. If there's any chance for ground disturbance, we really want to work closely with the tribe and with the Department of Archaeological and Historic Preservation to make sure we're not disturbing any cultural resources that are on the site. We apply for and receive those permits. We begin the project. Main thing is you keep all invoices. If you're not sure, keep it. That's what I tell everyone. And you really want to report everything you've done. You spent 30 minutes out working on your project on a given day, make sure to record that, because that all counts as towards your in-kind match, which is 25%. We cover 75% of the cost of the project. So the work that you perform, it can make up for that 25% match that's available. You must complete it in the allotted timeline and submit all your paperwork and receive reimbursement within 4 to 6 weeks. And this is an example of a farm plan. You know, we identify different areas on your property, kind of highlight where you're installing your well, where you want to put in that watering facility. This is the farm plan for the watering facility that I showed you earlier. Yeah, so it's a really cool chance for you to create a vision for what you want to do to your property in the not so distant future. So, my opinion on what this bank looks like right now. I mean, it's a pretty good bank, I will say, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, the main thing is we really want to plant native riparian vegetation. Like I mentioned before, when we come in and we develop a bank, a property along the river, we want that riverfront view. Well, like I said, a lot of that is what's holding your bank in place. So, if you come, if you come in and developed and you contact us again, that's really what we're going to encourage mostly. And we do work with the PUD on their erosion control and cottonwood fund. So you can receive up to $500 for your site to plant cottonwood, ponderosa pine, and other native riparian plants and shrubs like willow and red-odor dogwood. That's to increase eagle habitat. Also to address the temperature, that total maximum daily load, or that impaired temperature category metric that I mentioned earlier, and to also implement erosion control. You get up to $5,000 for erosion control practices too. So that would include installing small to mid-sized rock at the bank's toe. You have to monitor and remove aquatic invasive weeds as you go through, and I just learned about the PUDs, how they provide cost share for aquatic invasive weeds, so I will certainly be sharing that with people. Okay, so we see the bank, this is a before and after. We're seeing more reed canary grass. It does have some pretty decent vegetation. Like how I'm viewing these projects has changed. We really want to maintain as much of that vegetation as possible. So I've been on a number of site visits recently where, you've got a lot of vegetation, a lot of mature trees, but steep slopes. And really, if you're hoping to stabilize those steep slopes, re-slope them, get rid of the trees, I mean, it's not advised, because rivers move, they change. That's just how they naturally occur. Sediment is part of natural riverine habitat and ecosystems, but what we really want to focus on are areas where structures are located. If there's really a significant issue, then we're more than willing to help with you. And on the PUD's grant, they have a hazard occurrence erosion map, and in order to qualify for their funds, we need to have at least a moderate risk of erosion, and we can, when you contact us for a site visit and to go through this process, we'll work on that together. So, hold on. There we go. Cool. Right, so that the Ponderoille PUD provides up to $5,500 for erosion control and cottonwood plantings. So this is a pretty interesting example here. On the left, we have cottonwood fascines, I think that's how it's pronounced, but it's essentially bundles of cottonwood that are installed into the bank, and they then establish and grow roots. And this is what's called bioengineering. So you're using live organisms, live plants, to stabilize your bank for you, in addition to some re-sloping. Now it looks like the top of that bank is pretty close to the property line, so there's not much re-sloping that you can do. So on the right, we have some more significant re-sloping. We've got some rock plant applied, and then some live stakes planted as well. You really have to make sure that your vegetation survives. That's another big issue, because the water, water rises almost up to the top of the bank during high flows, and then it recedes. And then your banks are just sandy and dry. So really, you gotta get your sprinklers out there, you gotta set up a drip irrigation system. Hopefully we can maybe cover a drip irrigation system if that's something you're interested in, but I won't make that promise. But you really have to make sure those plants stay alive in order for you to not have to pay us back or have to keep doing it. So, living plants is what we're going for. Okay, I do have a couple videos. Let's see. Do we have time for some videos?
Yeah, if they'll work,
Okay.
let's see.
Yeah, let's see.
Oh, yeah.
My bad. Okay. Here, and maybe this project. Okay, so this is a potential project. Here, thicker, and share. there, yeah. Okay, so this is a video of a potential project that we applied for along the banks of the town of Medellin. It's a FEMA project, so it's through the Washington Emergency Management Division. You'll see Scott Junglum in this too. But it's up to a $4.5 million project to stabilize over 2,400 feet of bank. So we're really excited about it.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Case-Cohen, the District Manager for the Pend Oreille Conservation District. We are up in the town of Medellin on Riverside Avenue, speaking with Brian Smiley and Pete Daggett about a potential stream bank stabilization project that will protect critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm Brian Smiley, as former street commissioner, water commissioner here in the town of Medellin. Presently, I'm county commissioner for Pend Oreille County in District 3. Beyond that, I've lived here on Riverside Avenue since I think 1996. So I'm pretty well aware of the issues that go on here on Riverside Avenue. One of the things that we should be aware of is the main sewer main for the town of Medellin does go through the roadbed here. All of the town drains this direction, and then it goes down to the sewer treatment plant. So that's pretty critical infrastructure here. When the floods do come and when the river rises to a certain point, the current does direct into this bank, into Riverside. Further up, about where the yellow sign is up here, where the other street comes in 97, the river did come over this street. Where the trucks are here and where the camera is here, it would have been maybe 5 or 6 feet of water. The bank on the east side of the river probably has been reduced by about 8 or 9 feet since I moved in here in the 90s. We used to be able to park our cars across there and have a picnic table across there, and now if we walk further up there, you can see there's 3 or 4 feet. In fact, there was many more trees along the bank here. And every few years, the river's been undercutting them trees, they fall in the river, and they're gone with the high water. So that's a little bit of the history that's gone on here. And then further up on the very south end, we can see some actual kind of landslides that are threatening into people's yard there.
Hey, my name is Pete Daggett. I'm mayor of Medellin. I got on the town council back in 2007. I became the mayor in 2010. And really what all of the town is capable of doing and to
Sorry, that's the loudest it goes.
maintain and keep things from deteriorating. Yeah, it's become a real concern to everybody, especially the people who live on the road, but everybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's really a good question to ask is why would those that don't live here on Riverside be concerned with this project? For those that live in the rest of the town of Medellin, the concern they should have is the threat to the main sewer main that drains the sewer system for the town of Medellin is here on Riverside. The whole town is sloped gradually towards the river, and the last sewer main that goes on down to the sewage treatment plant is here in this roadbed, Riverside Avenue here in Medellin. So this bank erosion is a long-term threat to that sewer main. And we can see by the progression of the erosion that it's just a matter of time before that causes a serious and immediate threat to that sewer main. And if that were to happen, if there was some kind of a catastrophic failure of that sewer main, it would also pose a threat to those that live up and down the river from here on down even into the Columbia if that sewer would drain then into the Pend Oreille River. So that's a threat as well to the whole river system. Alex, you wanna add anything to that?
Sure. So another key component is restoring fish habitat. Again, we are in a dam system, so it's nowhere near what it used to be. But if we begin to restore our shorelines to look like they naturally had, you know, less rock, having more vegetation, a gentler slope, and potentially less sediment in the river, we can begin to restore that habitat, impact temperature. You know, if we're revegetating along the river, it may over time lessen, lessen the temperature, which is ideal for salmonids and other fish that have historically called this river home, which is of course important to the economy and the overall well-being of our ecosystems. So I'm here at Medellin on Riverside Avenue with Scott Junglum from the PUD. I've invited him out here to give his take on the potential stream-based stabilization project that will take place here ideally next year in order to protect the critical infrastructure on the street.
It's like 3 years out, it's not gonna
Yeah,
happen this year.
I'm Scott Junglum. I've started out at the Conservation District in Newport, working on bank stabilization projects like this for mostly private landowners that have a problem, don't know how to deal with it, and they need the different agencies' resources. It was just a conduit to connect people with the funds that were available to do work like that and get them the help they need. So I learned a little bit about bank stabilization projects like this during that. And then at the PUD, we have a bank stabilization fund that's available to help pay for some of the costs like this in the Box Canyon Reservoir. So that's why I'm here.
Great. So do you mind sharing with us a little bit about what can be done on this steep bank that will protect it for that 100-year term that you were speaking about?
So there's a lot of different options on how you might approach a project like this, but the most common one in our reservoir is to put a hardened toe or the bottom of the bank with some type of riprap or larger gravel with a sediment filter underneath, because if you put large stuff in there, the water scours behind it if you've got fine sediments underneath, and it just scours your riprap away and it falls down the bank. So you have to make sure that you put either a packed gravel bed underneath there that can't pull out through the cracks in the larger rock, or some type of a mechanical sediment filter underneath your riprap on the toe of the bank. And then you fill in with either smaller gravel or plantable soil on the less steep portion of the bank above that, so that you can put vegetation in there that will reduce the velocity of water coming by during flood events. If the bank is too steep and too close to the road, like we have in a couple spots along here, sometimes you have to run the riprap shell, if you will, higher up the bank because you don't have a slope that's gradual enough that you can keep topsoil and vegetation on. In those cases, you can put pockets of topsoil in there to plant through because the vegetation, once it grows, will roughen the texture of the stream bank and slow the velocity of water down as it comes by. If you've got boat lakes or wave action, it'll slow down that energy and disrupt it before it hits the shoreline and keeps your erosion down altogether. But those are just some of the techniques we use. The other habitat piece I'd like to add to it is if you can get decent trees, especially cottonwood and ponderosa pine, revegetation along the shoreline, that riparian habitat is essential to other sensitive species in the area like bald eagles. So right across the way we have a nesting pair of bald eagles that have been there for 15 to 20 years now. And of the eagle habitat that we have along the river, about 95% of them are in one of those two tree species, cottonwood or ponderosa pine. And they love riparian edge habitat like this along the shoreline. So trees that grow up, they make habitat for different bird species. And when they fall into the water, a lot of people don't like to see that, but that's what makes a fantastic fish habitat. It both slows down the velocity of water with a tree down in the shoreline, and it produces cover for young fish.
So we've identified the goals and the need for this stream-based stabilization project. Next is the process. So the town of Medellin has worked with the Pend Oreille Conservation District for the first fund. The first grant that they've received was for engineering funds, and we've had our engineer come out and create a design. So we've got the riprap at the toe, we have resloping, potentially adding some fill or soil as we've talked about, and then of course the important part is the revegetation. The stage that we're at now is applying that plan, because again, it's a plan, it doesn't necessarily represent exactly what is going to happen. We need to have, again, submitting permits, those would go to the county. They also go to the Department of Ecology, the Army Corps of Engineers, and Department of Fish and Wildlife to make sure that the project meets all of the requirements. At that point, we would have a contractor come out on site. They would give us a bid, further details on what the design will look like, and from there, it's a matter of working in what's known as the work window. So it's typically mid-July to the end of August when the water is at its lowest flow, and there is the least potential for impacting fish or other river habitat and river species. So we are waiting to hear back on the permits, and then the next step is, of course, speaking with the contractors. So I look forward to showing you all what will take place with this project in the future.
Alright. Sorry.
You gotta start your points. You're gonna get it done.
Here. I think it's still share. One second, you guys. Okay, great. So that kind of goes through the whole process. Again, we're now looking we've applied for funding for that particular grant. It goes through what the permit process looks like. A lot of the agencies are really easy to move projects through, especially for the projects that we're working on, because they do minimize sedimentation, they do provide habitat for fish. We have some issues with the Army Corps of Engineers permits, but hopefully we'll move those forward in the near future. So now we're going to kind of talk about, kind of close out a little bit. So I do want to really hit home that this is what natural riparian areas look like, right? They might sometimes have rock at the toe, they have a ton of vegetation, provide a lot of shade. You'll have that down debris, like what Scott said in the video, you'll have down large woody debris that creates pools for fish to find refugia, to find a place to hang out for a bit as they're making their way up to their former spawning grounds. This is a lot of what we want to see. I mean, we can't see this exactly because the system's different from what it was before we were here, but this is a lot of what we're going for. So I just want to preface that for landowners who are interested in stabilizing your bank. We don't pay for just rock all the way up to the top and only rock. We want to see vegetation. So know that it can still be beautiful and look gorgeous, and as Scott says a lot of the time, you can prune up cottonwoods and ponderosa all the way up so you can maintain that view if you want it, but we're thinking long term for our children and our children's children, and if we want to have that property along the river, we really need to engineer it or design it and implement it in a way where it mimics natural systems and also meets our needs. So this is an example of a 100% bioengineered bank stabilization project, likely. I think it's along the Salmon River, but you see a lot of these root wads. If you've seen Panhandle Park, the Forest Service campground and picnic area, I believe, they have a lot of root wads. So again, these are slowing down those velocities and those flows as they're moving around bends, moving down the river. They're creating habitat. You're seeing, we've got stakes here, we have coconut core, a lot of vegetation. So in 10 years, this is going to be very well vegetated. It's going to be beautiful. this is kind of, might be considered a happy medium. Again, it's a much smaller system, but you do have some rock at the toe, you've got that vegetation, you have some large woody debris, or large woody material, and resloping. So kind of a mix of all components is what we would like to see more of. So the process for potential POCD cost share, and I will say this year we received way more funding than what we would normally have. So at this stage, we're wanting landowners to come with us with their potential projects. Again, we want to see a moderate to severe risk of erosion. We want you to work with your landowners. We received a grant from the Department of Ecology for a neighborhood-wide project along Sandy Shores, so hopefully implementing 15 to 20 projects there, and we want to do more of that. You can potentially, we need to drum up these projects to show that the need is available, so please, again, let us know. We also have funding for engineering. 100% of your engineering costs are covered through a grant that we received through the Washington State Conservation Commission. We come out, conduct a survey, give you a site plan, and then it is largely up to you to submit your permits, but we're hoping to hire a riparian a person who works with restoration projects along the river to help you through your permit process. Again, it's a lot easier when you have more people. Regulators like to see that. You gotta receive all your necessary permits, so that does include the core permit. You gotta secure a contractor and a bid. You begin the project, again, keeping all your invoices, recording all the work done, complete the project in the allotted time. I did say August 30th, it's end of September 30th, and this work window might change because we have had so much rainfall so late in the year, so it could be into October, just depending on when the rain begins again. And then reimbursement may take at least 1 year depending on your time of planting. So that applies for the PUD's fund. They only reimburse once the project is completed, which includes planting. So you gotta plant either in the fall or the spring. Fall is a good idea, late fall is a good idea because plants are dormant, you'll have all that moisture, the snow, rainfall in the spring. Though I've heard that that's when beavers predate, if you will, on your woody species. So we might have to install some beaver protection or plant protectors. Again, these projects may take 2 to 3 years to complete, from start to finish. So can't call me right now and expect to get it done this year. That's just not reasonable. It's a long process, but it's worth it. So I just want you to know that. Yeah, so we've identified some of the water quality concerns in the county. Land use changes and agriculture have contributed to this decreased water quality, but you can work with your natural resource managers, us, the weed board, the PUD, the tribe, to learn how you can improve it. We offer programs to protect and enhance critical areas on agricultural parcels, help with stream-based stabilization, and you can help improve water quality in addition to controlling aquatic invasive weeds. So just reach out, let us know. All right, any questions? All right.
I guess you covered it.
Looks like you do have a question.
Is there a site that shows recommended flora to plant along the shoreline, or?
Yeah, so you can work with us. There are multiple species and it depends on where you're trying to plant. If you're upland, if you're planting into the bank itself, Scott can help you out a lot with that too. Cottonwoods, red dogwood, ponderosa pines up on the top of the bank can be helpful. Willows, native willow species, Douglas spirea, there's a lot. And we hired a resource technician who, he loves plants. He's a botany nerd, so we can have him come out and help create a planting plan for you if you're interested. So, go ahead.
Years back, several years back, plants were available through, I think through the county or maybe through the PUD. You could pick them up in Newport in the spring. Is that program still available?
So currently, we don't have our plant sale, but it is common for conservation districts. we received funding, so there's been a ton of funding for these summer recovery projects, and the legislature granted the Conservation District's $1.2 million for plant propagation. So I'm meeting with the Spokane Conservation District to maybe create a native plant nursery through the districts. We're also maybe hoping to partner with the tribe to double the size of their nursery to have local stock that's available. So, it's in the works. But if you need it for next year, Spokane CD or Stevens County have it. So, yeah. Cool, anything else?
All right, great, thank you.
There's a live question.
Oh,
Hold on one second. We were considering checking to see if we could add rock to the bank. Does this require a permit?
yes. Yeah. And also, you know, one thing, I've seen a lot of structures recently, I wanted to mention this, got concrete just thrown down with like pilings. That increases your erosion, right? So if you've got these huge hardened structures, you'll start to see some undercutting, or you'll create these eddies in the high flows that continue to eat away at your bank. So just don't talk to your conservation district and we'll help you, okay?
You might mention, so they can hear it online, even vegetation removal
Yeah.
requires a permit. Anything you do on the bank requires a permit.
Yeah, so even as Scott just said, anything you do on the bank requires a permit, even vegetation removal, even planting, I believe, still requires a permit. So, you know, I know it's our bank and we wanna do what we can with it, which I understand, but we only have it for a short amount of time, and then it goes to someone else. So we have downstream effects, we really need to protect our waters and our land for everyone, so. Looks like we have two more questions. Sharon, I saw you first.
So, noxious weed removal is exempt from permitting,
Nice, thank you.
but that's the only thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
On the bank, on the shore,
Okay.
it is, you do have to have a permit for it to water. That's the blue book.
Did you have a question, sir?
Is that within 100 feet of high water?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Depends on what you're doing. There's about, 5 different entities who have different permits governing actions along the shoreline. Some are 25 feet above ordinary high water, and first you gotta figure out where that is. Some is above that. I can't even, remember where the shoreline permit is. I think it's 150 feet, but it may be dependent on slope or something else, so. Yeah.
And we're non-regulatory, so if you have questions, like I'll give advice, but we don't share that information with the regulators. So if you're unsure, or you have done something and you're not sure, let us know, and it's all confidential. There's an RCW in place that states that all plans done with the Conservation District are confidential, so we can offer advice and we won't rat you out, I'll say. So. All right, yeah.
But if you need to know the answer to the question, you have to go to the county, because they're the hub for all the different agencies. So you tell them what you wanna do, and they'll farm it out and see who you need to ask the questions to.
Right. Go ahead.
So, the old septic systems, what effect do they have on the river?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure you're leaking nutrients into the water, you might even have heavy metals, yeah.
Is there any plan to fix any of that?
If there's a known source or a known location, would recommend maybe talking to the Department of Health about that. So there needs to be water quality monitoring done on the river regularly. I know the tribe does a lot of it. So if we see, or if a monitoring agency sees a significant increase or spike, then something might be done to kind of identify. That would, I think, be a point source, maybe. It could be non-point source, but yeah, we would love to if we knew of any actively leaking, but it's hard to say because, we don't know where they are located exactly.
I just know that we had to do, when we moved in, we had to do a lot of work on ours, and it amazed me that, because I knew knew where the neighbors were over here and over there, and they were different, like one was set back here, one was like, I don't know, probably 20 feet from the high water mark. And, but ours had to be, you know, all of those
Way,
changed.
right.
But I just wonder, you know, what kind of problems that presents when they're the old ones.
Yeah, it's real, it's very true, it's a very good question. All right, thank you guys.